Marta Jennings had never vomited through a dimensional portal before. She'd been warned that interdimensional travel affected humans differently than elves. Something about our shorter lifespans making the temporal displacements more acute, but no amount of briefing had prepared her for the sensation of her atoms being unzipped, stretched across 11 dimensions, and hastily reassembled like a rushed jigsaw puzzle. First time? The elven portal attendant didn't bother hiding her amusement. Her alabaster features remained perfectly composed, but her violet eyes crinkled at the corners. Isn't that obvious? Marta wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, grateful that at least she'd managed to aim away from her ceremonial diplomatic robes. She'd spent 3 hours that morning getting the ridiculous midnight blue outfit perfectly arranged, complete with the silver pins and medallions that apparently meant something to elves. Sorry about your floor. The attendant waved a long-fingered hand. A small curl of magic, actual magic, holy shit, swept the mess away. We have a dedicated cleaning crew for human arrivals. Of course they did. Marta straightened, breathing deeply and willing her stomach to behave. Her first day as Earth's new ambassador to the High Elven Court was not going according to plan. A soft chittering sound emanated from the specialized carrier at her side. Marta knelt beside it. I know. That wasn't fun for you either, was it? She unlatched the carrier and Fluffy's sleek black head emerged, amber eyes blinking in the strange light of Silverleaf's arrival chamber. Excuse me, Ambassador. The attendant's voice sharpened. Is that an animal? My emotional support companion, Marta explained, smoothing Fluffy's fur. The creature resembled an oversized cat, with unusually intelligent eyes and retractable claws that seemed just a bit too large for her frame. All my paperwork included her diplomatic clearance. She's been specially bred and trained. The elf's face had gone rigid. I'll need to verify that. Please wait here. Marta watched, puzzled, as the attendant practically bolted from the chamber. Did elves not like animals? Nothing in her cultural briefing had mentioned that. She scratched behind Fluffy's ears, drawing comfort from the familiar rumbling purr. Don't worry, girl. People always love you once they get to know you. 2 hours later, Marta found herself in a grand chamber that seemed to have been grown rather than built. The walls curved organically, polishing wood flooring flowing into stone and back again. The Elven High Council, 5 ancient beings draped in robes that made Marta's outfit look positively austere by comparison, sat in a crescent formation before her. And as Earth's new ambassador, I look forward to strengthening the ties between our peoples. Marta concluded her speech, trying to ignore the whispers and sidelong glances her presence had generated, ever since the painfully long wait at the portal station. In the spirit of cultural exchange, I bring greetings from the United Earth Government. She reached for the carrier at her feet, wanting Fluffy's reassuring presence as she handed over her official credentials. The moment the carrier opened and Fluffy stepped out, stretching her midnight black limbs after the long confinement, the chamber exploded into chaos. Guards materialized seemingly from thin air, long spears directly pointed at Fluffy. Council members leapt from their seats, some drawing ornate daggers, others beginning to weave what looked like defensive spells. Attendants screamed. Someone shouted orders in Elvish too rapid for Marta's translator implant to process. What the hell? Marta instinctively scooped Fluffy into her arms, turning her body to shield the animal from the weapons. What are you doing? A tall elf with ash-colored hair and a face lined with age stepped forward. His finger pointed accusingly. You dare bring a night beast into our sacred halls? His voice cut through the pandemonium, silencing the room. After all they have taken from us! What? This is Fluffy! My emotional support animal? That, the elf snarled, is an abomination that has slaughtered thousands of my people. Guards, destroyed immediately! The spears advanced. Fluffy hissed, her fur standing on end. Touch her and you violate 14 separate clauses of the Human-Beast Alliance Treaty of 2121! Marta shouted, backing away. She has full diplomatic protection as my registered companion animal. She had no idea if this was true, but it sounded plausible enough to make the guards hesitate. Chancellor Theriel, a young elf whispered urgently to the ash-haired leader. The treaty implications. I don't care about treaties, Theriel snapped, but he raised a hand, halting the guards. Ambassador Jennings, you will surrender that creature for immediate execution, or what? Marta's diplomatic training was screaming at her to de-escalate, to find compromise, but some instinct told her that showing weakness now would be disastrous. You'll violate the diplomatic exchange between our peoples? Over a therapy animal? Theriel's ancient face contorted with emotions Marta couldn't begin to interpret. You will be escorted to your quarters. The beast will remain with you, under guard until this situation can be resolved. He turned to the other council members. This meeting is adjourned. As Marta was led away, Fluffy still clutched protectively in her arms. She caught fragments of heated elvish conversation. Absolutely unprecedented. Does she truly not know? Or is this some human provocation? None of her briefings had mentioned anything about Nightbeasts. Either Earth's diplomatic corps was criminally incompetent, or something was very, very wrong with her assignment. Fluffy, for her part, seemed unusually alert, her amber eyes tracking every elf they passed with unnerving intensity. They're called Nightbeasts because they hunt exclusively after sunset, Arendor explained, his tall frame awkwardly folded into a chair clearly designed for even longer limbs. As Marta's assigned liaison, he'd been ordered to explain the situation, an assignment he clearly resented. They're predators that feed on magical energy, particularly the kind elves naturally emanate. Marta glanced at Fluffy, who was currently curled peacefully on a cushion, seemingly asleep. That's impossible. Fluffy eats specially formulated protein pellets. She's never shown any aggression except toward mice. Arendor's mouth tightened. Perhaps your breed has been modified. But make no mistake, Ambassador, what you've brought here is the equivalent of bringing a tame tiger to kindergarten. Except these tigers apparently eat magic, Marta muttered. Why wasn't any of this in my briefing materials? I suspect your government was counting on diplomatic protocol to override our usual restrictions. We would have done stricter searches had you not used a direct diplomatic portal. His tone suggested this was a loophole that would soon be closed. Marta paced the luxurious chambers she'd been assigned. The room, like everything in Silverleaf, blended natural elements with subtle magic. Living flowers bloomed from the walls, casting soft, ever-changing light. Under other circumstances, she would have been entranced. I need to contact my superiors. There's been a mistake. The communication crystal is there. Arendor pointed to an amethyst formation, growing from what appeared to be a living desk. But it's nearly midnight. The council expects your decision by morning. Decision? Whether you will comply with the destruction of the beast, or forfeit your position and return to Earth. He stood to leave. For what it's worth, Ambassador, I believe you truly didn't know. But that ignorance doesn't make the creature any less dangerous. As he left, Marta collapsed onto the unnecessarily soft bed. Guards stood outside her door, more to keep Fluffy in than to protect her. She pulled out her tablet and frantically searched through her briefing materials again. Nothing. Not one mention of Nightbeasts or any historical conflict. What the hell am I supposed to do now, Fluff? She whispered. The animal lifted her head, amber eyes reflecting the magical light, and for just a moment, Marta could have sworn she saw something like calculation in that gaze. The first assassination attempt came just after 3 a.m., according to Marta's watch. She woke to Fluffy's weight suddenly leaving the bed, followed by a terrible hiss that sounded nothing like her normally docile companion. In the dim phosphorescence of the living flowers, she saw a shadowy figure leaning over her pillow, and then Fluffy was airborne, launching herself at the intruder with savagery that froze Marta's blood. The assassin cried out, stumbling back as obsidian claws raked across their face. Marta rolled off the bed, fumbling for anything to use as a weapon, but the struggle ended as quickly as it began. The intruder fled through a window Marta hadn't even realized could open, leaving behind only a small dart embedded in her pillow. Elven guards burst in seconds later, spears raised and pointed at Fluffy, who sat calmly washing her paws as though nothing had happened. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded the guard captain. "We heard a disturbance." "Someone just tried to kill me!" Marta pointed to the dart. "If Fluffy hadn't—" "The Nightbeasts attacked someone?" The captain advanced, his spear leveled at Fluffy's head. "No! I mean, yes, but they were trying to assassinate me!" Marta positioned herself between the guard and her pet. "For God's sake, check the dart! It's probably poisoned!" The captain reluctantly examined the dart, his expression darkening. "This is blood rot venom. Potent poison." He glanced at Fluffy with confusion. "The beast protected you?" "Of course she did! That's what she's trained for!" Marta's hands now shook as adrenaline coursed through her. "Now are you going to find the person who tried to murder an ambassador? Or are we still pretending my cat is the problem here?" After the guards finally left to investigate, Marta had her doubts. She sank to the floor beside Fluffy, who was now meticulously grooming herself. "How did you even know they were there?" she whispered. "And where did you learn to fight like that?" Fluffy paused her grooming to meet Marta's eyes, and for the first time since arriving in Silverleaf, Marta felt a creeping unease about her companion. The animal seemed to be studying her, evaluating. Even more disturbing was what Marta noticed as daylight began filtering through the elvish crystal windows. Fluffy was methodically examining every artifact in the room, sniffing particular objects, occasionally pawing at specific sections of walls, as if testing for something. This was not her normal behavior. Not even close. "Fluffy," Marta said carefully, "what exactly are you?" The Nightbeast barely blinked those intelligent amber eyes and continued her inspection. The next 3 days passed in a diplomatic nightmare. No officials would meet with Marta while Fluffy remained in her possession. Her calls to Earth went mysteriously unanswered. Arendor brought her meals and messages, each more terse than the last, but offered no real assistance. On the 4th morning, while reviewing her original mission brief for the 100th time, Marta discovered something odd. A section of seemingly boilerplate diplomatic language contained irregularly spaced letters that, when isolated, spelled out a hidden message. "Package delivery essential to mission success. Maintain proximity at all costs." Marta stared at the decoded texts, then at Fluffy, who was sunning herself in a patch of light. "The package isn't the diplomatic pouch, is it?" she said aloud. "It's you." Fluffy's ear twitched, but she didn't open her eyes. "I have been set up." The realization landed like a stone in Marta's stomach. "But why? What could Earth possibly gain from antagonizing the elves this way?" A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. Arendor entered without waiting for her response. "You are required to attend the Soul Branch ceremony this afternoon," he announced. "It is non-negotiable." "Meaning the council hopes public outrage at seeing a Nightbeast will force my hand?" Arendor didn't deny it. "The beast must be leashed at all times." "Her name is Fluffy, and she doesn't need a leash." Despite her growing suspicions about her mission and her companion, Marta felt oddly protective. "But fine, I'll comply." The Soul Branch ceremony turned out to be an elaborate ritual held in tiered gardens that spiraled around a massive tree. Elves of all ages gathered in their finest attire, their natural grace making Marta feel like a particularly ungainly toad by comparison. The whispers and hostile stares followed her everywhere. She'd fashioned a leash from a silken robe provided by a servant and attached it to Fluffy's ornate collar. The animal had submitted to this indignity with surprising patience, but now tugged insistently in specific directions, forcing Marta to navigate the crowd awkwardly. "I'm so sorry," she apologized, after Fluffy's sudden movement caused her to step on an elf's flowing robes. She's not usually like this." "Bringing that abomination here is an insult to the memory of our dead," the elf spat, before gliding away. It wasn't until the ceremony was half over that Marta realized Fluffy had systemically led her to a secluded section of the gardens, away from the main gathering. Ancient stone monuments rose from beds of night-blooming flowers, each carved with elven script and images that made Marta's blood run cold. They depicted creatures like Fluffy, but massive, fanged with too many limbs, tearing into elven bodies, entire villages in flames, children being carried off into darkness. "Gods," Marta whispered, her translator implant working overtime to decipher the memorial text. "The great massacre of the western forests. 8,000 dead in a single night." More monuments told similar stories spanning centuries. The blood moon culling, the siege of Silverlight, the hollowing of Elderreach. Fluffy sat beside her, watching her face intently as the horror dawned. "What am I even doing here?" Marta asked, her voice breaking. "What game is Earth playing?"
"Perhaps the better question," said a voice behind her, "is what game your companion is playing."
Marta whirled to find a tall, almost gaunt elf regarding her with open curiosity rather than the usual hostility. His robes were simpler than most, ink-stained at the cuffs.
"I am Lysanther," he said, "and I believe we have much to discuss, Ambassador Jennings. Nightbeasts are not simply animals,"
Lysanther explained, later in his clustered study, walls lined with books and strange artifacts.
"They're an intelligent species, with their own culture, language, and magic."
"Like elves?" Marta asked.
"In some ways, though their magic manifests differently."
He cast a sidelong glance at Fluffy, who sat unnervingly still, watching their conversation.
"They can sense and manipulate magical energies directly. Some can even feed on it."
"The elves believe they're soulless killers."
"Most do, yes. I've spent centuries studying both sides of the conflict. The historical record is inconsistent."
"Inconsistent how?" Lysanther pulled out an ancient tome from a shelf.
"Compare these accounts of the blood moon culling. The elven version describes unprovoked slaughter, but these fragments of Nightbeast record, exceedingly rare, I might add, describe a desperate counterattack after elven mages began draining their sacred grounds of magic."
"So, both sides think they're the victims?"
"Precisely." Lysanther leaned forward. "Now, Ambassador Jennings, let me conduct a simple test, if you'll permit it."
Before Marta could answer, he had drawn a complex symbol in the air. It flared with silver light before shooting toward Fluffy like an arrow. Marta cried out, but instead of striking Fluffy, the light surrounded her, creating a glowing aura of intertwining patterns. Lysanther gasped.
"Impossible," he whispered. "This signature is royal."
Fluffy hissed, the sound distinctly annoyed. "Royal?" Marta repeated.
"Ambassador," Lysanther said, his voice hushed. "Your pet contains magic equivalent to our High Queen. This is no ordinary Nightbeast. This is..."
A crash interrupted him as the study doors burst open. 3 figures in dark cloaks rushed in, hands weaving spells that crackled with energy unlike any Marta had seen. One spell struck Lysanther, sending him flying into a bookshelf. Another headed straight for Marta. Fluffy moved faster than should have been physically possible. She leapt between Marta and the spell, and as the magic struck her, her form shifted. For just an instant, the small feline body elongated, becoming something more humanoid, with obsidian skin and blazing eyes. The spell dissipated harmlessly. Then, before Marta could fully process what she'd seen, Fluffy was a cat-like creature again, launching herself at their attackers. The fight was chaotic, brutal. Lysanther recovered enough to join the fray, his own magic slicing through the air. When it ended, the attackers had fled, leaving behind scorched floors and shattered artifacts. "What the hell just happened?" Marta demanded, shaking with adrenaline. "And what the hell are you?" She pointed at Fluffy, who sat calmly licking a wound on her foreleg. We don't have much time.
The voice entered Marta's mind directly, feminine, ancient, and distinctly annoyed.
Yes, it's me. No, you're not hallucinating. Yes, I've been deceiving you. No, I don't have time to soothe your human feelings about it.
Marta stared at Fluffy in shock.
My name is Nyxara, exhaled queen of the Nightbeasts, and we have a serious problem on our hands, Ambassador. You've been reading my thoughts this whole time?
Marta paced Lysanther's study while the historian applied healing salves to his injuries.
Only the surface impressions, and only when in physical contact.
Nyxara, still in her smaller form, sat regally on a stack of books.
It was the most efficient way to learn your language and customs. Efficient? You've been manipulating me since day one!
Marta ran her hands through her hair.
Was Earth in on this? Am I just a puppet for everyone? Your superiors believe I am exactly what you thought, a therapy animal. They were manipulated by agents already embedded in your diplomatic corps.
Agents like those that just attacked us? Lysanthar interjected. Those weren't elves or nightbeasts. Their magic had a different texture.
Void weavers.
Nyxara's mental voice dripped with contempt.
Ancient parasites who feed on conflict. They've been manipulating both of our peoples for millennia, ensuring our hatred remains fresh and our wars continue.
That's convenient, Marta scoffed. Blame all the bloodshed on mysterious third parties.
I need you, human.
Nyxara's mental voice softened slightly.
I could have mind-controlled any elf to bring me into Silverleaf, but it would have been detected. You were the perfect cover, a diplomatic novice, naturally anxious, reliant on a support animal. The Void Weavers never suspected I would use a human ally.
I am not your ally!
But you could be. You've seen how they tried to assassinate you. The Void Weavers have infiltrated all 3 of our civilizations. Only together can we expose them. Marta turned to Lysanther. Is any of this remotely possible?
The historian nodded slowly. It would explain the historical inconsistencies I've found. The same provocateurs appearing in different centuries, always vanishing after inciting the worst massacres.
So, what do you want from me? Marta asked Nyxara. I need access to the Elven archives, and eventually a formal audience with the High Council. But first, we must gather evidence.
And why should I help you, after all these lies?
Because right now, Ambassador Jennings,
Nyxara's amber eyes bored into hers.
The only thing standing between you and Void Weaver assassins is me. And I suspect you'd like to know why Earth Diplomatic Corps sent you here to die.
Breaking into restricted sections of the Elven archives proved surprisingly easy with an ancient queen shapeshifter and an eccentric historian who had spent centuries finding ways around prohibitions on his research. These records were sealed by royal decree after the hollowing of Elderreach. Lysanther whispered as they slipped through a doorway, hidden behind a seemingly solid wall of crystal. They contain first-hand accounts from survivors.
What are we looking for exactly? Marta asked, feeling distinctly out of her depth among magical texts she couldn't even read. Inconsistencies. Descriptions of key figures, strong evidence of manipulation. They spent hours combing through ancient scrolls and crystal memory stones. Lysanther would occasionally exclaim over a particular find, adding it to a growing pile of evidence. Nyxara directed their search through brief telepathic impressions, still maintaining her smaller form to avoid detection. Marta, unable to read most of the text directly, focused on comparing illustrated accounts. A pattern began to emerge. These figures keep appearing, she said, pointing to depictions of specific elves and nightbeasts in leadership positions during key conflicts. But according to the dates, they'd have to be alive for hundreds of years after supposedly being killed in earlier battles. Exactly.
Nyxara sounded grimly satisfied. Void Weavers use the identities of fallen leaders to push for escalation. Both sides believe they're avenging their heroes, never realizing they're being manipulated by imposters.
And these same individuals appear in Nightbeast records?
Marta asked.
With reverse narratives. The elven hero becomes the Nightbeast villain, and vice versa.
A sudden commotion outside the archives halted their investigation. Guards approached, accompanied by the unmistakable authoritative step of Chancellor Theriel.
"We've been discovered," Lanther hissed. "They're coming for us."
Marta looked frantically for an escape route, but the only entrance was about to be blocked by a dozen elite guards.
"I'll stall them," she decided. "You two hide with the evidence."
"That won't work." Nyxara jumped from the table to the floor. "They'll tear this place apart looking for us. There's only one option now."
"What are you—"
Before Marta could finish, Nyxara's form began to change. The small, feline creature elongated, bones shifting audibly as midnight black fur retracted into obsidian skin. Within seconds, where Fluffy had been, now stood a regal humanoid figure with luminous amber eyes, an aura of ancient power radiating from her slender form. The door burst open. Guards flooded in, spears leveled, then froze in horror at the sight before them. Theriel pushed through the guards, a spell already forming at his fingertips. Then he too stopped cold. "By the first tree," he whispered. "A Nightbeast queen! In Silverleaf itself!" Nyxara drew herself up to her full height, which was considerable. When she spoke, her actual voice was musical, yet commanding.
"Chancellor Theriel of the High Elven Court," she intoned. "I am Nyxara, sovereign of the Night Realms, queen of the people you call Nightbeasts. I formally request asylum and a hearing before your full council, as is my right under the ancient accords of the First Age."
The guards looked at Theriel, clearly expecting orders to attack. Marta held her breath. Theriel's face worked through shock, fury, and calculation before settling into cold formality. "The accords have not been invoked in 3,000 years, he said. "But they remain binding." He turned to his guards. "Escort the queen to the arbor chamber. She will have her hearing." His gaze fell on Marta and Lysanther. "And her associates will join her there." As they were led away under heavy guard, Marta whispered to Nyxara.
"That was your plan all along, wasn't it? Use me to get inside, gather evidence, then reveal yourself when the time was right?"
Nyxara's lips curved into what might have been a smile on a human face.
"I needed someone who would react authentically to everything they discovered. Your genuine shock and outrage have been most convincing, Ambassador."
"I hate you a little right now."
"I know. But that hatred will pass when you realize I'm the only one telling you the truth."
News of a Nightbeast being in Silverleaf spread through the Elven capital like wildfire. By the time an emergency council session was convened the next morning, enormous crowds had gathered outside the arbor chamber, their angry chants audible even through the ancient living wood of the walls. Inside, the full council, 12 elves of varying ages, all radiating power and suspicion, sat in a perfect circle, with Nyxara, Marta, and Lysanther standing at its center. Guards lined the walls, weapons ready. "This unprecedented situation requires unprecedented measures," began High Queen Selenes, who rarely involved herself in governance, but was required for matters of ancient law. "The Nightbeast Sovereign has invoked the right of audience. We shall hear her claims." "Before she slaughters us all!" shouted one counselor. "The audience is protected by a magic older than this city," Selenes replied calmly. "No violence may occur within these walls during a formal hearing." She nodded to Nyxara. "Speak, Queen of Night." For the next hour, Nyxara presented their evidence. She spoke with the measured cadence of someone who had ruled for centuries, weaving a compelling narrative of manipulation and deception. Lysanther provided historical context, while Marta, drawing on her diplomatic training, translated the more complex concepts into terms the council could relate to. Theriel remained stone-faced throughout, but other council members showed growing disquiet as the pattern of Voidweaver interference became clear.
Even if this fantastical tale has merit, Theriel finally said, it changes nothing about the blood spilled over centuries. Your kind has slaughtered thousands of ours.
As have you slaughtered thousands of mine, Nyxara countered. Yet here I stand, offering peace rather than retribution.
A convenient position when you're outnumbered in the heart of our stronghold.
Chancellor, Marta interjected, with respect, the evidence shows both sides have been victims. Continuing the cycle of blame only serves the Voidweaver's purpose.
A side door opened before Theriel could respond. A group of elves in unfamiliar ceremonial garb entered, led by a stern-faced female with silver hair.
The delegation from the Eastern Groves, announced a guard. They request immediate audience on matters of grave security.
Nyxara went rigid beside Marta. Voidweavers, her telepathic voice hissed. All of them.
How can you tell?
Marta whispered. Their magical signatures are wrong. Disguised, but detectable to one of my lineage. Before Marta could respond, the silver-haired leader of their delegation stepped forward, her voice silky with concern.
Esteemed council, we bring dire warnings. Our seers have detected...
She stopped abruptly, staring at Nyxara with perfectly feigned shock.
A Nightbeast! Here! Guards!
The council erupted into confusion. The delegates began weaving defense spells, their hands moving in complex patterns.
They're not what they seem! Lysanther shouted above the chaos. Test their magical signatures!
The silver-haired leader's face contorted with sudden rage. She abandoned her spell and lunged directly for Queen Selena's, a hidden blade appearing in her hand. Nyxara moved faster, intercepting the attack. The blade sank into her shoulder instead of the Elven Queen's heart. The chamber's ancient protective magic, designed to prevent violence, flared to life, but unexpectedly sputtered and failed. The Voidweavers had somehow corrupted it in advance.
The protection spells! Theriel shouted. They're compromised!
Elven guards clashed with the disguised Voidweavers, while council members frantically tried to restore the chamber's defenses. Nyxara fought with both physical prowess and dark, pulsing magic that seemed to drain the light from the very air. Marta, painfully aware of her lack of magical abilities, did the only thing she could. She grabbed Lysanthar's fallen research and protected it, diving behind an overturned table as spells crackled overhead. The battle reached a turning point when Nyxara managed to physically restrain the silver-haired leader. With a complex gesture, she forced the Voidweaver's true form to manifest. A writhing, shadowy entity with too many limbs and eyes that burned with hatred. "Behold your true enemy!" Nyxara called out, her voice carrying above the din. "The architects of our mutual destruction!" The fighting gradually ceased as the elves stared in horror at the revealed infiltrator. The remaining disguised Voidweavers, their cover blown, fled through windows and doors, pursued by guards. In the sudden quiet, Marta emerged from cover to find Theriel standing over the captured Voidweaver, his expression thunderous.
How many? He demanded. How many of your kind have infiltrated our realm?
The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass.
We are everywhere. We have always been everywhere. Your hatred sustains us. Your wars feed us. We will never...
Its monologue ended abruptly as Nyxara placed a hand on its writhing form. Darkness spread from her palm, and the creature simply ceased to exist, collapsing into nothingness. "A mercy it didn't deserve," Nyxara said grimly, "but necessary.
Their true forms cannot survive long outside a host. Silence fell over the chamber as Elves and Nightbeast Queen regarded one another across centuries of engineered hatred. Finally, Queen Selenis spoke. It seems, Chancellor Therial, that we have much to reconsider. A joint task force? Ambassador Drillian's face on the communication crystal looked skeptical. The Elves are actually proposing cooperation with the Nightbeasts? After seeing Voidweaver infiltrators with their own eyes? Yes. Marta kept her expression neutral, though internally, she was scrutinizing her supposed superior for any sign that he too might be compromised. Earth's participation would be welcome, given our neutral position on the historical conflict. This was the first successful connection she'd managed with Earth's diplomatic corps since her arrival. Her initial urgent calls had gone mysteriously unanswered. When she did briefly reach junior staff at headquarters, the communication crystals would suddenly malfunction. Whenever she mentioned Fluffy or Nightbeasts, connections dissolving into static or cutting off entirely. It had taken Lysanther's ancient magical knowledge and Nyxara's power to bypass the standard channels, creating a connection pathway that couldn't be monitored or blocked by potential infiltrators. Now, she finally had Dralian himself on the line. Dralian frowned. This is highly irregular, Ambassador Jennings. I'll need to consult with the Diplomatic Council before... Of course, Marta interrupted smoothly. Though, I should mention that both Queen Nyxara and Chancellor Therial have expressed interest in examining how the Voidweavers might have infiltrated Earth's diplomatic corps. Perhaps even influenced the selection of certain personnel. Her eyes narrowed. They're particularly curious why critical information about Nightbeasts was completely omitted from my briefing materials. The skin around Dralian's eyes tightened, and a pulse visibly jumped at his throat. She'd caught him off guard. I'll expect your response within 48 hours, Marta continued to express pleasantly. After which, I'm authorized to proceed with Earth's provisional involvement regardless. Diplomatic necessity, you understand? She ended the call before he could respond, sitting back with a sigh. 3 weeks of intensive negotiations had aged her what felt like years, but they'd made remarkable progress. At Nyxara's suggestion and using Lysanther's ancient magical knowledge, they'd established direct communication with the Nightbeast territories for the first time in centuries. Now, she mostly understood why she'd been chosen for this assignment. An inexperienced diplomat with an emotional support animal, deliberately sent unprepared into a volatile situation. The perfect, unwitting pawn to trigger a diplomatic catastrophe that would reignite ancient hatreds. The Voidweavers had been playing a long game, infiltrating all 3 civilizations over centuries. And they had nearly succeeded. A knock at her chamber door interrupted her thoughts. Arendor entered, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The Elven Nightbeast delegation has arrived for the preliminary peace conference, he announced stiffly. Thank you, Arendor. Marta gathered her notes. Any signs of trouble? Beyond ancient enemies attempting civility? No. His mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Though, I must say, watching the Nightbeast Regent try to navigate elven dining customs last night was... educational. Marta laughed. I imagine Krathu feels the same about Therial attempting Nightbeast greeting rituals. As they walked through Silverleaf's grand corridors toward the conference chamber, Marta marveled at how quickly things had changed. Elves still regarded Nightbeasts with suspicion, certainly, but the presence of a proven common enemy had worked wonders for diplomatic relations. Nyxara waited outside the chamber once again in her full regal form. The Nightbeast Queen had abandoned pretense entirely since the revelation. Ambassador, she greeted Marta formally. Are you prepared? As I'll ever be. Marta straightened her diplomatic robes. Though, I still think you're overestimating my importance here. On the contrary, Nyxara's amber eyes held surprising warmth. You possess something neither elves nor Nightbeasts have. Perspective, untainted by centuries of hatred, and a particular human stubbornness that refuses to accept impossibility. Also, Questionable humor in crisis situations, Marta added wryly.
That too. Nixara almost smiled. Shall we begin? They entered the chamber together, where representatives of 3 species waited to attempt what many still considered impossible: peace. The first sign that something was wrong came midway through the second day of negotiations. An elven aide collapsed during a presentation on territorial boundaries. Minutes later, a Nightbeast delegate began experiencing similar symptoms: weakness, magical disruption, confusion. Soon, representatives from both species were falling ill across Silverleaf. Only the humans, including Marta, seemed unaffected.
It's targeted,
Marta realized, watching medics tend to stricken delegates.
only affecting magical beings.
Nixara, herself beginning to show symptoms, nodded grimly. The Void Weaver's final gambit. They've activated dormant magic embedded throughout Silverleaf.
Can it be stopped?
Perhaps, but we need to find the vocal point. Nixara's voice weakened as her magic faltered. The spell would require an anchor, something ancient, tied to both elven and Nightbeast magic. Lysanther, pale but still functioning, joined them. The memorial pillars in the ancient quarter. They contain crystallized magical residue from the First Age, when our people were still one. Marta's head snapped up.
When you were still one?
A theory only, he murmured. But the earliest records suggest elves and Nightbeasts diverged from a common ancestor, splitting along lines of magical affinity.
Then that's where we need to go, Marta decided. You two stay here. You're both affected by whatever this is. I'll take some human staff and investigate.
You won't know what to look for, Nixara protested.
Then explain it to me.
Marta met her gaze steadily.
Humanity's finally good for something in this mess. We're the only ones not keeling over from magical poison.
The memorial pillars stood in Silverleaf's oldest district, 12 ancient monoliths arranged in a perfect circle. Following Nixara's instructions, Marta and 3 human aides began examining the arcane symbols etched into each pillar's surface.
There!
Called one aide, pointing to a subtle discoloration on the 3rd pillar.
That pattern doesn't match the others.
Soon enough, a network of faintly glowing lines had been added to the original carvings, forming a parasitic spell that pulsed with sickly energy.
It's drawing power from the conflict between Elven and Nightbeast delegates, Marta realized. The more they distrust each other during their illness, the stronger it gets. It's a self-perpetuating cycle.
Following Lysanther's hastily provided instructions, they began the process of dismantling the malicious spell. Hours of painstaking work revealed similar corruptions on all 12 pillars. As they finally disabled the last anchor point, a sudden pulse of energy knocked them all to the ground. The pillars flared with blinding light, then returned to their dormant state. When Marta returned to the conference chamber, she found delegates already recovering, though tension remained high.
The spell is disabled, she announced, but we found something else.
She handed Nixara and Theriel the rubbings they'd taken from the pillar's original inscriptions.
Something the Void Weavers tried to hide.
The 2 leaders examined the ancient text, their expressions growing increasingly troubled. This cannot be, Theriel murmured. Yet, it explains everything, Nixara replied softly. Lysanther, now recovered enough to stand, peered over their shoulders. The creation hymn, he breathed. The unaltered version. It's been obscured for millennia.
What does it say?
Marta asked. It says, Nixara answered, that elves and Nightbeasts were once a single people. The Void Weavers conducted a magical ritual that split our species into light and dark aspects, severing our shared heritage and creating eternal conflict to feed upon. Silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. Centuries of hatred, based on an artificial division. Countless deaths serving only to nourish parasitic manipulators. Then the peace we seek, Theriel said slowly, is not some diplomatic innovation, but a return to our natural state.
Assuming anyone actually believes this.
Regent Crathuel growled from the Nightbeast delegation.
Convenient revelations appear at convenient times.
I felt the truth in the pillar's magic, Nyxara said simply. As did you, Chancellor Theriel. The elven leader nodded reluctantly. I did.
Then perhaps, Marta suggested, we should focus less on who believes what, and more on what we all want now. Safety from Voidweaver manipulation, and a chance to write our own futures.
1 week later, representatives from all 3 species gathered in the fully restored Arbor Chamber for the formal signing of the Silverleaf Accord. The document established a joint task force to identify and neutralize Voidweaver agents, mutual defense protocols, and preliminary cultural exchange initiatives. Marta, as both catalyst and mediator for the historic agreement, was granted the unique position of Tri-Realm Ambassador, official representative to and from all 3 societies. After the ceremony, she found Nyxara in the memorial garden, contemplating the newly restored pillars.
Having regrets about not eating me when you had the chance?
Marta asked, joining her. Nyxara's lips curved into that almost smile.
Occasionally. Especially during your more creative diplomatic phrasings.
I particularly enjoyed your face when I compared Voidweavers to parasitic fungi at the signing ceremony.
Inelegance, but effective.
Nyxara turned to face her fully. You've accomplished something remarkable here, Marta Jennings.
We all did, Marta shrugged. Though I still don't fully understand why Earth sent me here with you. Was Drellian a Voidweaver?
Almost certainly, though he's conveniently disappeared since our last communication. Nyxara's expression darkened. They'll try again. Different forms, different methods, but always seeking to reignite conflict.
Then we stay vigilant.
Marta gazed at the ancient pillars.
I've been meaning to ask. Those domesticated Nightbeasts we have on Earth, the ones I thought Fluffy was, are they related to your people?
Nyxara made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Distantly. Very distantly. A branch that evolved without significant magical capabilities, rather like humans themselves.
Did you just compare me to a pet cat?
Would you prefer I didn't? Marta laughed.
I suppose there are worse things to be compared to.
She grew serious.
What happens now? To you, I mean. Will you reclaim your throne?
Eventually. Nyxara looked out over Silverleaf, her ancient eyes reflecting the setting sun. But first, I believe Earth should receive its first official Nightbeast diplomatic delegation. After all, your people have already demonstrated a curious affinity for adopting our distant cousins.
Earth might not be ready for that.
Few are ready for true change, Ambassador Jennings. Nyxara placed a hand on Marta's shoulder. But as you've so thoroughly demonstrated, readiness is entirely optional when necessity calls. Together, they watched the darkness fall over the elven capital, not as a harbinger of terror, but simply as the natural counterpart to day. Balance, after too long an imbalance. A first step on a road neither of their peoples had ever thought to travel, but which, perhaps, they had been seeking all along.